So the Kachana Pastoral Station, it's a small family-run company committed to hands-on custodianship. And Chris is going to come and talk to us and work through what he's delivered, what he's done on the property. There are some controversial aspects to it, but I'll let Chris explain that to you. So thank you very much, Chris. Take it away.
Thank you, Tim. Bad news first. I'm now a cranky old man, and you have Louise to blame for having to put up with me for a few more minutes. But there's good news as well, and that is we still have those who've got time on their side. There's some really noble challenges ahead of us, and I think we have a sporting chance of succeeding. Biomimicry is no longer the mystery that it may have been 40 years ago. We can readily tap into innovations that have been tested worldwide. Increasingly, we can cite the science that supports our methodologies. So why biomimicry? Nature provided the cradle for us to develop and to thrive as a species. We want to thrive, but more importantly, we wish for our children and our grandchildren to thrive. So why not see what nature could teach us? What we have learned is that when she builds a dryland economy, nature puts to use three teams. Three teams that play for each other. We have producers, consumers, and recyclers. So the producers, broadly speaking, are those that harvest the free sunshine we get on a daily basis and pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and feed things underground and feed things above the ground. Then we have the consumers. Their net role is to consume what the producers produce. And then we have the recyclers, and their job is whatever's not consumed to make it biologically available for the continuation of the cycle. If players behave in line with the function of their team, so long as the sun shines and so long as water drops out of the sky every year, the economy grows. Resilience is inbuilt. Counter to present-day political thinking, though, permanent growth is not physically sustainable. Nature solves this dilemma by introducing disturbances. Disturbances of external origin, sunspots, earthquakes, volcanoes. Disturbances of internal origin, migration, predation, human-lit fire. More importantly, disturbances vary in frequency and intensity, and they also interact with each other. Sometimes only players are affected, like lightning hitting a tree. But sometimes teams get impacted, like megafauna disappearing or plant culling. Here's a picture from the USA. Nature appears to be governed by laws. One of them is form follows function. To illustrate this point, let us just do a simple exercise together. From these world-leading teams, in our mind, we will randomly form one new team. 15 players representing 3 different language groups. Right? So here's our new team. We're now going to challenge a successful English-speaking first team of a high school. We do this on their home ground. Players have known each other, been coached together, have played together for over 4 years. Their supporters are present and we'll be cheering them on. We are going to have 3 20-minute games. Who will win? I'd like you to keep the answers to yourself for later. So this is our new team with players who can't talk to each other versus a team who've been playing together for 4 years. Putting domesticated animals to work as a herd is something that seems to work for us. Remember, it's the outcomes that we're after. Form follows function, and the outcomes are a result of the behavior. With that in mind, I'm going to show you 4 short videos, and I'd like you to keep an eye on the behavior. Here we have a herd being led into green grass for 8 hours at high density. It's basically a planned biological storm. A sight we could see anywhere. The critical issue here is that we still have moisture in the ground. So after a maximum of 8 hours of mulching, fertilizing and pruning, this area will not see another hoof for at least 8 weeks, probably 4 months. Plants and microbes then get sufficient time to rebuild their lives and their energy reserves. It's what I call ecological bodybuilding. Incidentally, this is where we have apparently been adding about 6 tons of carbon to the hectare every year for the last 25 years. Here's another one. In this case, it's an 8-hour time lapse of a herd overnighting on maturing pasture at high density. Once again, watch the movement, watch the vegetation. In the end, every square meter will have been literally massaged by hoofs. Mulching, fertilizing, and pruning occurs. The animals also take time to lie down, chew their cud, and sleep. Again, we do not come back here for at least another 2 months. During each treatment, this area is visited by more mouths and hooves than in the past. Ground cover increases, plant density increases, the bulk grown each year increases, and we end up with more carbon in our soils. The rehydration of the soil profile improves. Animals are putting on weight, but more importantly, with more sunshine and more carbon entering the equation, we're increasing the yield per hectare. It's now in the early hours of the morning. Some of them starting to lie down and never sleep. Others are still busy. Notice how they're processing the bulk vegetation that was there before. Here, it's the dry season. We have no salads, only dry, fresh muesli. But this herd is on a mission. It has to climb a hill to get its evening meal. This time, we're not fattening animals. They're actually there to feed the soil with mulch, dung, and fertilizer. Mulch, dung, and urine. We say that a beast has 5 mouths, 1 to feed herself with, and 4 to feed the soil. So they're not being pressured up there, they actually want to go up there. Now again, dry, fresh muesli, this time it's a little sparse. So we need to give them access to a greater area. Once again, mulching, fertilizing, and pruning, and not only grass. Watch the fellow in the middle. These animals are locally adapted, and they know where to find something if it's around. Here we have a job well done. Nature's sunscreen covering bare ground. Mulch to protect the ground from the heat, radiation, and the pressure cleaner effect of torrential rainfall. Ground cover also slows down Australia's 2 biggest water thieves, gravity and the evaporation off bare ground. This country is now ready for the wet season, whenever it decides to come. In tropical and subtropical and savanna systems, reliable perennial stream flow could once again become the norm. Water that is captured during the wet season, water that is percolated through the soil profile, filled up aquifers and raised water tables, that then slowly makes its way along drainage lines. This creek used to run dry each year. It now flows all year round, and we've got a 2-inch water pipe leading out of it to supply our camp. Please note, the water is there because of the grass. And the grass is there because of the way we manage the herbivores. We have naturalized humans, animals, and vegetation working together. So in a landscape, once we know what we need to achieve, we know the basic rules and functions that are required. then we simply need to adapt the player behavior to achieve the desired results. We call that management. Management in complex situations should by nature be adaptive. So back to our rugby game. When everybody knows the rules, players know how their team is to function and how they need to behave. Language and coaching is no longer that important. The reason why we will get a good game is because form will follow function. The reason why our new team will win at the latest by game 3 is because all players are professionals. They have a greater working knowledge of team function and they will behave accordingly. So despite language barriers and no coaching, form will follow, i.e., a functional team which will win. In our case, the herbivores are the professionals, and given the chance, they will perform. So here's a bird's eye view of the progress of our game. The arrow is where the photo was taken, the last one. This is my take-home message. But it does come with a caveat. The players need to be supporting the functional role of their team. In Northern Australia, every year, we rip off much of the skin that should be protecting and feeding our soils. We do this mostly before it gets really hot. Then we expose bared ground to weeks or months of heat, radiation, and dehydration, trusting that next wet will bring back new growth. If we do this too often, not only do we lose our habitat trees and make life uncomfortable for all who live there, we also end up with more and more country looking like this. The targeted influence of large animal behaviour promises to deliver a whole range of environmental services. Prosperity is the result of well-managed, functioning landscapes. For the price of an airline ticket, we can find out for ourselves what happens to communities when they lose water security. They lose life. Often the life of animals, vegetation and soils first, before we notice the loss of human life. So where do we go to from here? Deep down, we already know the answer. And that is why most of you knew who will win Game 3. I argue that biosecurity begins with water security. Water security comes as a result of managed large herbivores that keep vegetation healthy and thereby help protect it from fire. Humans have used fire in the landscape for ages. Using megafauna to grow grass and to rehydrate our landscapes is relatively new, and we still have much to learn. However, in both instances, the science is getting clearer. I support Louise's notion that people taking the role of custodianship seriously should get paid for the valuable services that they produce. And I thank you for bearing with me. I'm happy to field a few questions. Are you aware of the pictures that I showed earlier on were about the 3 teams where we need severe grazers to process the bulk of the vegetation? And that's where the donkeys come in areas where cattle can't do it. And the disturbing thing we've watched over the last 30 years is how we're gradually replacing herbivores with fire. And I think this is something that's probably started BC. It was presumably stabilized prior to Captain Cook arriving. And now, in the unmanaged areas, we have got back to where we're replacing herbivores with fire. And it's the role that our donkeys are playing at the moment is just phase one is where we're actually trying to just reduce the impacts of the wildfire, which we get every 3 years anyway. So we were locked into a 3-year wildfire cycle, except for in the model areas, where we're trying to demonstrate what is possible. But in the areas where we do have the wildfire, we're using the donkeys to at least minimize the impact. The next phase would actually be getting those donkeys out there with cattle and doing broader areas, because at the end of the day, if we get biology to do the work, and we're talking about beginning on a square foot, you're scale neutral. So it's we look at the microbes that do most of the work in the soil, in the rumen bugs, and then the larger animals are just the vectors to take these things out, take the biology out into the landscape. I'll give you one example, which I haven't worked out. I'll have to do the maths. But John Dunnicliffe, for instance, added 80,000 animals to a landscape where previously there were 20,000. Now just think of the amount of water alone that is carried out on a daily basis back into a seasonally dry landscape. Now there's no way that we can do that just with the kangaroos and nibblers, but not only can we take water back out into the landscape and dot the landscape with biologically active microcytes that will run for about 2 months and stay dormant until the wet season starts, we can also manage the animals in a way that we can actually then create fire breaks or low fuel zones that we can then respond to any arson or lightning strikes. So it's, at the end of the day, what I'm looking at is the roles of the animal behavior, and I think anybody who wants to do the job gets the job as far as I'm concerned. I mean, right now I've got a young Swiss fellow, he wants to work, well, he can do it. I've had people do PhD students, I've had all sorts of people. At the end of the day, whoever does the job gets the job. I'm not into ethnic cleansing by any means. And if I can find someone who can go into the areas where the cattle can't go, they've got the job. And the donkeys are doing a sterling job right now. So eliminating the donkeys for me basically means I'm just going to have to use a lot more fire than I feel comfortable with. So there's practical considerations there.